Send my dad to prison. And send the whole team with him.
That's not responsive to the question, Your Honor. The witness was asked whether his father delayed medical attention.
He wasn't asked for a sentencing recommendation.
He wasn't finished, counsel.
Mr. Reeve, what did you mean by that? I mean, my dad wasn't the only person on that field that day. He was just the only one you arrested.
Objection. Speculation.
It's not speculation if he can back it up, and he can.
Then let him.
Go ahead, Micah.
My dad asked for a longer water break that morning. I heard him ask. He got told no. Somebody made that call. It wasn't my dad. So if this court wants to send somebody to prison for what happened to Emery, it should at least be honest about who actually gave the order.
At the back of the gallery, Cormac Steele adjusted his cufflink and did not otherwise move, the particular stillness of a man who had already decided, long before this morning, exactly how today needed to end. Strike the witness's last statement as argumentative, Kepler said. Denied, Judge Correll said. This court will hear the rest of what this young man has to say, in full, before anyone strikes a word of it. 4 months earlier, August Reeve had been 42 years old, a certified athletic trainer with 15 years at Talmadge County High School, the only adult on the Ironhawks sideline with an actual medical license instead of just a whistle and a playbook. He checked ankles, taped wrists, and watched the sky the way other men watched a scoreboard. Because he'd learned early in his career that the difference between a hard practice and a tragedy was usually somebody willing to say the word stop before it was too late to matter. His wife, Marielle, had been in and out of specialists' offices for the better part of 2 years, managing a chronic illness that had no clean finish line, no single crisis to point to, just a slow, grinding uncertainty that August carried quietly alongside everything else. Micah, 14, was the Ironhawks team captain, a linebacker with his father's watchfulness and his mother's stubborn optimism, and he wore a GPS sports watch to every single practice. Not for any dramatic reason, just because he liked tracking his own splits, timing his sprints against himself the way some kids kept baseball stats. You don't get to call it a team, August told him once, on the drive home from a two-a-day that had run long and hard, until you're willing to protect the ones nobody else is watching. The starters get watched. The guy on the third string doesn't. Most days. That's who you're really playing for. Micah had nodded along the way. A 14-year-old nods at something he half understands and fully intends to remember anyway. August had come to athletic training almost by accident, after a knee injury ended his own college playing days early, and left him with 2 years of physical therapy and an unexpected fascination with exactly how a body breaks down and rebuilds itself. He liked the work because it rewarded attention over ego. Nobody remembered the trainer's name when a season went well, and that suited him fine, because he'd never once done the job for the credit. What he couldn't abide, in 15 years on that sideline, was watching a preventable injury happen because somebody upstream had decided a schedule mattered more than a body did. Their house sat 3 streets from the stadium, close enough that on autumn Friday nights, Micah could hear the crowd noise through his bedroom window, a sound he'd loved since he was small enough to fall asleep to it. Marielle kept a framed photo on the hallway wall of August's first season as head trainer. The two of them, younger and unworried, in a way neither had managed to feel in the 2 years since her diagnosis, and August passed it every morning on his way out the door. A small, deliberate reminder of what steadiness was supposed to look like. Cormac Steele ran Vantage Sports Network out of a regional office 2 towns over, and for the better part of a year had been quietly assembling a multi-season broadcast and sponsorship deal for Talmadge County Stadium. New lights, a renamed field, a rights package worth more to the school district than 3 years of its athletic budget combined. The deal's final condition was simple and, on paper, harmless. A television crew would film 1 full August practice for a season opener preview special. on a date that could not move, because the network's production schedule had already been locked for 6 other schools across the region. The morning of that practice, the heat index climbed past 100 degrees before 10 o'clock. August flagged it to Athletic Director Elton Dade before the first whistle. "We need to double the water breaks today, minimum," August told him. "This isn't a judgment call. This is the protocol." The crew's arriving at 11:30. Coach Finch needs the full 2-hour session on camera, or the network pulls the segment. Then the network waits. The network doesn't wait, August. Nobody above me is going to tell Cormac Steele his crew wasted a trip. Dade didn't quite meet his eyes. "Shorten the brakes. Keep it moving. I'll take the heat if anybody complains." Coach Aldous Finch, standing a few yards off with his whistle still in his hand, heard enough of that exchange to know exactly what was being asked of him, and said nothing, because his own son Wyatt had a provisional spot on a regional travel program that Steele personally sponsored, a spot that could evaporate as easily as it had appeared. The water breaks that day ran 2 minutes instead of the mandated 10. Emery Slate, 16, a defensive lineman more beloved for his jokes than his stat sheet, went down in the 4th period, and August was at his side within seconds. But seconds that day were already too late for what heat alone had done to a body denied the water it needed for 2 hours straight. Emery Slate died at the hospital that evening. "Mr. Reeve, you're under arrest for negligent homicide in the death of Emery Slate." The detective read it flatly, the way men read things they've decided are simpler than they are. "I flagged the heat index before practice even started. I asked for longer breaks. I was told no." "Told no by whom?" "Elton Dade. Ask him. We'll be following up with everyone involved." The detective's tone made clear how far down that list August's name had already fallen. "How many people were on that sideline when Emery went down?" "That's not relevant to the charge in front of you, Mr. Reeve. It's relevant to whoever's actually responsible," August said. "I'd like to know somebody's planning to ask that question, even if it isn't going to be you. You're arresting the one person on that field who tried to stop it," August said as they turned him toward the car. "That's not an investigation. That's a shortcut." Micah stood in the driveway and watched them take his father away, homework still clutched in one hand, the particular helpless stillness of a kid watching adults decide something enormous without asking him a single question first. "Dad," he started and got no further, his voice catching somewhere he couldn't push past. "Hey." August stopped, just long enough to look at his son instead of the men on either side of him. "Listen to me. This isn't because of anything I did wrong. It's because somebody found it easier to arrest the man standing closest to Emery than to ask who actually gave the order. That's not the same as guilt. Don't let anybody at school tell you it is." "Okay," Micah said, though nothing about it felt okay. "Call Simone Vaughn," August told him, over his shoulder, the last thing he had time to say. "Number's in my phone. Don't wait to make that call." Marielle Reeve heard the news from her hospital bed 2 hours later, and it took every ounce of the strength she had left, managing her own illness, to sit up and sign herself out against medical advice so she could be home when her son needed someone who wasn't 14 years old, making every decision alone. "They think Dad let Emery die," Micah told her that night, sitting on the edge of her bed, his voice raw in a way she hadn't heard since he was small. "He didn't," Marielle said. "You know he didn't." "I know, I was there." Micah's hands were shaking. "Nobody's asked me what I saw yet. They just keep asking Dad." "They'll ask you," Marielle said. "And when they do, you tell them exactly what you told me. Nothing more, nothing less. That's all the truth ever needs from you. You shouldn't have signed yourself out. You're supposed to be resting." He set his backpack down slowly, still not quite looking at her, the way he did when he was trying not to let her see how frightened he actually was. "I've spent 2 years resting while your father held this family together. Every single day, I couldn't," Marielle said. "One night, I get to be the one holding something up. Let me have it." Micah didn't argue with that. He sat with her a while longer, the hospital bracelet still on her wrist, and thought, not for the first time, that his mother's illness and his father's arrest had arrived close enough together that some nights it felt like the whole house was being tested at once to see how much weight it could actually carry before something gave. "You don't get to call it a team," he said quietly, half to himself, "until you're willing to protect the ones nobody else is watching." "Where'd you hear that?" "Dad. He says it all the time." Micah looked at his hands. "I keep thinking about who was supposed to be watching out for Emery that day. It wasn't supposed to be just Dad's job. It was supposed to be everybody's." Simone Vaughn met August 3 days later in a cramped visitation room, laying out the shape of the case against him with the plain, unhurried honesty of a lawyer who decided early that her client deserved to know exactly how bad it looked. "The state's whole case rests on one idea," she said, "that you, as the trained medical professional on that field, should have recognized the danger and stopped practice regardless of what anyone told you. They don't need to prove malice. They just need a jury to believe you had the authority to stop it and chose not to. I didn't have the authority. Elton Dade does. He told me the crew's schedule mattered more than the protocol. Then I need that in writing, or in a witness's mouth. Because right now, it's your word against a company line that says the opposite." Simone closed her folder. "Did you put your request for longer breaks in writing anywhere?" "I sent Dade a text that morning. We need to double breaks today, minimum. Heat index is past protocol." He never answered it. "Then that text is the first real thing we have," Simone said, setting the printed message down between them on the table. "Phone records don't lie about a timestamp, even when everyone standing on that field that day would rather forget one. What happens if Dade denies getting it? Carriers keep delivery records independent of either phone. He can deny reading it. He can't credibly deny it landed." Simone made a note. "I want to be straight with you about something else, Mr. Reeve. The state's theory is simple and it's sympathetic. A licensed professional, 3 feet away, didn't stop it in time. Simple beats complicated with a jury more often than any of us would like. My job is going to be making sure they understand that didn't stop it and wasn't allowed to stop it are two very different sentences. I asked, in writing, that should count for something." "It will," Simone said. "I intend to make sure of it." Tallmadge County's preliminary hearing, held 2 weeks later, gave Simone her first real opening. "Mr. Dade, did Mr. Reeve contact you the morning of the practice regarding the heat index?" Elton Dade shifted in the witness box. "I don't recall a specific message. Your Honor, I'd like to enter Defense Exhibit 3. A text message from the defendant's phone to Mr. Dade's phone, timestamped 9:15 that morning. Objection, Foundation. The carrier's own records confirm the timestamp and delivery, Your Honor. I have the certified log." "I'll allow it," Judge Carell said. Simone read the message aloud, plain and unadorned. "We need to double breaks today, minimum. Heat index is past protocol." "Mr. Dade, did you respond to this message?" "I don't believe so." "Why not?" "I was managing a lot that morning." Dade's composure cracked, just slightly, at the edges. "The production crew's arrival time was fixed. I made a judgment call to keep the schedule as close to normal as I could." "Whose judgment call was it, ultimately, to shorten the water breaks specifically?" Coach Finch relayed the schedule to the team. "Who told Coach Finch to shorten the breaks?" Dade hesitated. "I did, under direction." "Direction from whom?" "Objection, relevance." "It's entirely relevant, Your Honor. This court is being asked to convict a man for failing to stop a decision he didn't make," Simone said. "Overruled. Answer the question, Mr. Dade." "Cormac Steele's office called me that morning to confirm the crew's arrival window couldn't move," Dade said. "I made the call to shorten the breaks myself, based on that information." "Did you ever inform Coach Reeve that the shortened breaks came from Mr. Steele's office, rather than a coaching decision?" "No. Why not? I didn't think it would matter to the outcome." "It mattered enough that he's sitting at that table facing prison for a decision he never made," Simone said. "No further questions." Kepler rose for cross, unhurried. "Mr. Dade, isn't it possible the heat illness that killed Emery Slate would have occurred regardless of break length, given the conditions that day?" "It's possible," Dade admitted. I'm not a physician, so this court has no way of knowing, from your testimony alone, whether longer breaks would have changed anything at all. No, Dade said. Not from my testimony alone. It was a small crack, and everyone in the courtroom felt its size anyway. The first thread pulling the story away from the shape the state had built it to hold. Simone spent the following weeks pulling on that thread, and it didn't take her long to learn that the Vantage Sports Network deal was worth more to Tallmadge County's athletic budget than any single season in a decade, and that Cormac Steele had personally pushed the production timeline through over objections from 2 other schools that had asked for a later date. I wanted this specific game, this specific week, this specific broadcast window, Simone told August, spreading documents across the visitation table. August recruiting rankings come out in September. A strong preview special the week before matters more to a network's ad sales than almost anything else on their calendar. He wasn't going to let a heat advisory move that date if he could help it. You're telling me a television schedule is worth more to him than a kid's life? I'm telling you he never had to make that trade directly, Simone said. He just had to make sure nobody underneath him felt like they had permission to say no. That's a different kind of guilt, but it isn't a smaller one. How much is the deal actually worth? Enough that Tallmadge County's athletic director answers Steele's calls faster than he answers the superintendent's, Simone said. Enough that 2 other schools on his broadcast schedule asked for later dates because of heat advisories of their own, and both got moved without complaint. Tallmadge didn't get moved. I want to understand why this one date, on this one week, mattered enough to hold firm. You think it's personal. I think September recruiting rankings are worth more to his ad sales than almost anything else on his calendar this year. And I think a man who built his whole company back from nothing isn't in the habit of missing a single deadline he can control. Simone closed her folder. I don't believe Cormac Steele wanted Emery Slate to die, Mr. Reeve. I believe he wanted a production schedule to hold, and never once let himself imagine what holding it might actually cost, because imagining it wasn't his job. That's how men like him stay clean on paper, while everyone under them gets dirty instead. That same week, in an office with a view of the stadium, his network was about to rename Cormac Steele, placed a call he did not want traced back to his direct line. Elton's testimony is a problem, he told an aide, then dialed Elton Dade himself, his voice even, unhurried, the tone of a man solving a problem without ever once raising it. Elton, I need you to understand something about how this looks from where I'm sitting. I answered the question truthfully. Every dollar Vantage puts into that athletic department is a decision I make personally. Every renewal cycle, Steele said. Fields, equipment, travel budgets, the youth programs your own staff's kids benefit from. If this starts looking like a pattern of blame pointing in directions it doesn't need to point, I'll have a hard time recommending we renew any of it next cycle. Not just the stadium deal, all of it. That's the whole athletic department, Cormac. Every sport in the district. Then I'd think carefully about what direction this keeps pointing, Steele said. That's not a threat, Elton. That's just how a budget works, once trust stops flowing the way it used to. Elton Dade did not sleep well after that call. He knew a department-wide funding threat was too big and too abstract to move any one coach by itself. So he drove to Aldous Finch's house that same night and narrowed it down to something smaller, sharper, and much harder for one man to ignore. Your boy's spot in Cormac's regional program, Dade said, standing in the driveway with his hands in his pockets. I wouldn't want that getting swept up in whatever this turns into. I'd rather you heard that from me than found it out the hard way. That's Wyatt, Finch said slowly. You're talking about my son. I'm not saying anything's decided, Dade said. I'm saying Cormac notices who's helpful and who isn't. That's all I came here to say. Coach Finch said nothing for a long moment, standing in his own driveway with his hands in his pockets, and did not call Simone Vaughn that night, or the next, though the thought sat with him every hour he wasn't actively trying not to think about it. Wyatt Finch was 12, small for his age, and had spent the better part of 2 years working toward that regional spot with an intensity that made his father proud and a little afraid at once. Aldous Finch had watched his own son's face the night Steele's program accepted him, and he could not, standing in his driveway with Elton Dade's warning still fresh, make himself be the man who watched that same face learn what it felt like to lose something that big. "I just need a little time to think," he told his wife that night, which was true, and also the kind of true a man tells himself when what he actually needs is permission to keep doing nothing a little longer. His wife didn't push. She'd watched him carry the weight of that morning for weeks already, the particular hollow-eyed exhaustion of a man rehearsing a version of events he didn't fully believe, and she suspected, better than he did himself, that the version he'd given at the preliminary hearing wasn't going to be the one he could live with for long. The night before the reconvened hearing, weeks later, Micah sat at the kitchen table with his mother, his father's absence still a physical weight in the empty chair between them, running through everything Simone had told them might or might not happen the next morning. "What if the watch data doesn't match up the way we think it will?" Micah asked. "Then it doesn't, and we'll have told the truth anyway," Marielle said. "That's not nothing. Even on the nights it doesn't feel like enough. I keep thinking about what Dad always says, about protecting the ones nobody else is watching." Micah turned his own watch over in his hands. "I wasn't a starter that whole practice. I was just standing there, timing my own splits because I like numbers. Nobody was watching me either. I just happened to be wearing something that was. Sometimes that's exactly how the truth survives," Marielle said. "Not because anybody planned it, because somebody was paying attention to something small, for reasons that had nothing to do with what it would end up proving. Not everyone in Tallmadge County pulled away. A handful of parents from the freshman and JV squads. Families. August had taped ankles and iced shoulders for over a decade, never once billing for the after-hours favor. Began quietly organizing a rotation, driving Marielle to her specialist appointments on the weeks August couldn't be there, since visitation hours and hospital hours had an inconvenient habit of overlapping. "You don't have to keep doing this," Marielle told one of them, a woman named Louetta Briggs, whose son August had kept off a badly sprained ankle 2 seasons running, against the previous coach's wishes. "Didn't ask if I had to," Louetta said, signing the visitor log at the specialist's office without looking up. "August spent 10 years making sure my son could still walk normal by the time he graduated. Least this family can do is make sure you're not doing this alone." It wasn't much against a case this size, but it was steady, week after week, without anyone ever asking to be thanked for it. It kept Marielle's appointments from piling up while August sat in a cell 4 months running. Some weeks, Micah would understand only much later. That was the difference between a family that held together and one that quietly came apart at the seams. And none of the parents who did it ever mentioned it again, which was, his father always said, usually how you could tell somebody had done it for the right reason. At school, Micah found the hallways harder to walk through than the courtroom. A few teammates avoided him outright, their parents having decided, over dinner tables Micah never heard, that his father's arrest meant the family was somehow now a liability to be kept at a distance. "My mom says maybe your dad really did mess up," a teammate told him at his locker. Not cruel, just repeating something he'd absorbed without examining it. Like maybe he panicked. He didn't panic. I was standing right next to him. He was counting Emery's pulse before the trainer's kit was even open. "I'm just saying what I heard." "Then hear this instead," Micah said. He asked for more water breaks that morning. In writing, somebody told him no. That's not panicking. That's the opposite of panicking. And I'm tired of people deciding what happened without asking anybody who was actually there. "I'm not trying to start anything," the teammate said, glancing away, clearly wishing he'd never brought it up in the first place. "I know," Micah said. "That's what makes it worse, honestly. Nobody thinks they're doing anything wrong by repeating what they heard secondhand. It just adds up different when it's your own family it's landing on. A different teammate, overhearing, cut in before it could go further." He's not wrong about the text, though. My dad's on the booster board. He said Dade's been weird about that whole practice since it happened. Wouldn't answer a straight question about it at the last meeting. Micah looked at him for a second, surprised by the small, unexpected ally. Tell your dad to keep asking. I will. That night, Micah told his mother about the conversation, sitting at her bedside with his homework untouched in his lap. It's not fair, he said. Everybody gets to have an opinion about Dad, except the people who actually saw what happened. Then make them listen, Marielle said. You're not wrong to be angry, Micah. Just don't let the anger talk instead of the truth. The truth's stronger anyway. It doesn't need help. Cormac Steele found Micah in the courthouse hallway during a recess the following week, the only time the two of them spoke directly through the entire proceeding. You're August Reeves' son. Steele said it like a fact he was filing away rather than a question. I'm sorry about your friend. Genuinely. Are you? I sponsor a great deal of what happens at that school, son. Fields, equipment, opportunities, most towns your size never see. His voice stayed even, almost warm. It's a large operation. Sometimes decisions made at the top don't land the way anyone intended by the time they reach the ground. That's not anyone's fault exactly. It's just how a big machine runs. Somebody told my dad no when he asked for more water. That's not a machine. That's a person. People make judgment calls every day. Under pressure, most of them never chose, Steele said, already turning to go. He paused, just out of easy earshot, and added, almost kindly, I hope this resolves however it's supposed to, for your father's sake, and your coach's son's sake too. Come to that. I was gone before Micah could ask him what he meant by the second part. It would be weeks before Micah understood exactly how deliberately Steele had chosen those words. The formal trial, when it began, moved through its early days with the grinding, procedural weight that swallows most cases whole. Expert testimony on heat illness, progression, cross-examinations that circled without landing. Simone's theory of institutional pressure taking shape slowly against a state case that stayed simple and devastating. A licensed medical professional had been standing 3 feet from a dying boy and hadn't stopped practice sooner. Emery's mother, Dinah Slate, testified early in the trial. Her voice steady in the particular way grief sometimes goes when a person has decided crying in public would only give the room permission to look away from what she actually needed them to hear. My son wasn't the biggest kid on that field, or the fastest, she said. He was the one who made sure the freshmen didn't eat lunch alone their first week. That's who August Reeves spent 15 years training to protect. Kids like Emery, the ones nobody puts on a highlight reel. She looked directly at the jury. I don't believe for 1 second that man let my son die because he didn't care enough to stop it. I've watched him tape 100 ankles at 100 practices. He cared plenty. I want this court to find out who decided that caring wasn't going to be enough that morning. Objection. This is argument, not testimony. Sustained. The jury will disregard the witness's final statement, Correll said. Ms. Slate, thank you for your testimony. It might have been enough on its own. Then the case turned, hard in a single afternoon. Your Honor, the defense's hydration station log, purporting to show water dispensed at each break, cannot be authenticated today, Kepler said. The school district's IT department has not yet certified the export, and the raw device data remains unverified. I'd ask the court to exclude it pending certification. Regrettably, I have to agree, Judge Correll said. The log is excluded for now, Ms. Vaughn, absent proper certification from the district. Worse followed within the hour. Coach Aldous Finch, called to confirm Dade's account of who had ordered the shortened breaks, took the stand and did not say what he'd told Simone privately 2 weeks earlier. To the best of my recollection, the decision to adjust the water break schedule was a coaching judgment made on the field that morning, based on the practice plan, Finch said, not meeting August's eyes. I don't recall anyone from the network side directing that decision specifically. Simone sat back down with the particular stillness of an attorney doing quiet arithmetic, on how much of her case had just walked out of the room in under an hour. The log was gone. Her one witness who could tie Steele directly to the order had just quietly taken it back. Kepler moved through the rest of the afternoon with the confidence of a man who has just watched the floor open beneath his opponent. And for the first time since the arrest, August let himself imagine, sitting at the defense table with his hands folded in front of him, the actual shape of losing. He did not sleep that night. He sat on his bunk, turning the day over, the particular sick clarity of watching two separate pieces of hope taken off the table in a single afternoon, and let himself imagine, for the first time since the arrest, the actual shape of losing, not as a legal outcome, but as a season 5 years from now, when Micah would be grown and August would still be exactly here, having never once gotten to tell a jury the truth in a way anyone was willing to accept. Micah found him still awake at the kitchen table when he came down for water, and sat across from him without being asked. "Are we going to lose?" Micah asked. "I don't know," August admitted, because he'd promised his son a long time ago never to hand him a comfort he didn't believe. "I know I asked for more water that morning because it was the right thing to ask for, and that doesn't stop being true just because a jury might not believe it. Coach Finch lied today. I heard about it at practice." "I think Coach Finch is scared for his own son," August said. "I'm not going to pretend that makes it easier to sit with. But being scared and doing the wrong thing anyway doesn't make a man a monster, Micah. It just makes him human in a way I hope you never have to be tested on." "I still hate that he did it." "You're allowed to hate what he did," August said. "Just try not to let it be the last thing you decide about who he is. People get to come back from being scared sometimes. Not always, but sometimes." He rubbed a hand over his face, tired in a way sleep alone wasn't going to fix. "I've known Aldous Finch 12 years. He's not a bad man. He's a scared one. Those aren't the same thing. Even on the days it's hard to tell them apart. What if he doesn't come back around? What if this is just how it stays?" "Then we go forward with what we've got," August said. "The way I taught you to. You don't stop asking for the truth just because the last person you asked flinched away from it. You just find the next honest person and ask them instead." "Is that another one of your sayings?" "Same one, actually," August said, managing something close to a tired smile. "Just wearing different pads." Simone came to see August the next morning, and for once she didn't open with strategy. "I'm not going to pretend yesterday wasn't bad," she said. "Without the hydration log and without Finch's corroboration, we're relying on one unanswered text message and a theory about motive. That's not nothing, but it's not enough on its own. What do we do?" "I've filed an emergency motion demanding the district's IT department certify the hydration log today, not next month. And I want Micah's GPS watch data pulled and authenticated independently through the manufacturer. If it shows the same short break window the log was supposed to show, it walks back in through a door nobody can challenge, because it was never in the school's hands to begin with. And if Finch doesn't come back around, then we go to closing with what we have," Simone said. "But I didn't take this case to stop asking for what it needs, just because yesterday went badly." Simone filed the emergency certification request herself the next morning, standing in front of Judge Correll to argue it in person. "Your Honor, the district has had 3 weeks to certify this log and has offered nothing but delay. This court has already seen what happens when the only physical record in this case sits in the hands of a party with reason to shape it. I'm asking the court to compel a straightforward, technical certification that should have taken a single afternoon. Mr. Kepler, the state takes no position on the district's internal processing timelines," Kepler said, which was as close as he came all week to admitting he had nothing left to stand on. "Motion granted," Correll said. "I want that certification in this courtroom before closing arguments, or I want a very good explanation for why not." The watch manufacturer's records division responded within 2 days, faster than expected, in part because Coach Finch, who had spent those 2 nights sitting with a decision he could no longer live inside of, called Simone himself before she'd even finished drafting the second request. "I need to tell you what actually happened," Finch said. "Elton came to my house and told me Wyatt's spot in Steele's program depended on how helpful I was willing to be. I let that sit with me for 2 days and told myself, protecting my own son wasn't the same as lying. It was. I'm done pretending otherwise." The reconvened hearing, when it came, filled every seat the courthouse had. "The defense recalls Coach Aldous Finch," Simone said. Finch took the stand steadier than before, his hands no longer restless at his sides. "I need to correct my earlier testimony," he said, before Simone could ask her first question. The decision to shorten water breaks that morning came directly from Elton Dade, relaying instructions tied to Cormac Steele's production schedule. "I was told my son's spot in a regional program Mr. Steele sponsors could be affected by how cooperative I was. I let that fear speak for me 2 weeks ago. It doesn't get to speak for me any longer." Objection. This witness has now contradicted himself under oath. "His contradiction is the direct result of a threat made against his son," Simone said, "which is a very different problem than the one counsel is describing." "Overruled," Judge Correll said. "Continue." "Your Honor, the defense renews its motion to admit the hydration station log, now certified by the district's IT department. The images and timestamps, projected for the jury, showed water dispensed for roughly 2 minutes at each break that morning, a fraction of the mandated 10. "Admitted," Judge Correll said. "One more matter," Simone said. "The defense calls an authentication specialist from the watch manufacturer to confirm Micah Reeves' device data from that morning. The specialist's testimony took a careful 10 minutes. That the device's GPS and heart rate data synced automatically to the manufacturer's server the moment each session ended, independent of any school system, and that the timestamps from Micah's watch that morning matched, to the minute, the hydration log's own record of 2-minute breaks instead of 10. Can you explain, in plain terms, why a 14-year-old's fitness watch would happen to capture this at all?" "I wasn't trying to document anything," the specialist said. "He was tracking his own sprint splits, the way a lot of young athletes do now, purely for his own interest. The device doesn't know or care what it's proving. It just records what actually happened, second by second, whether anyone meant for it to or not." "No further questions?" "Not a guess," Simone said quietly, letting the two exhibits sit side by side a moment longer. "Not a memory that might have blurred with time. 2 records nobody at this school or this network could touch, confirming exactly what a 14-year-old told this court from memory the very first day he was allowed to speak." Simone turned to Cormac Steele, seated in the gallery, and did not raise her voice. "Mr. Steele, did your office contact Elton Dade the morning of the practice to confirm the production crew's arrival window could not move?" "My office makes routine scheduling calls constantly. I couldn't tell you the content of every one." "Did you personally instruct Mr. Dade that the crew's arrival window could not move, regardless of weather conditions?" "I communicated the production constraints. Weather wasn't part of that conversation, to my recollection." "Were you aware, at the time of that call, that a heat advisory had already been issued for that morning?" A pause. "I may have been made aware, generally." "Generally," Simone repeated. "Mr. Steele, in 15 years of broadcast production, has your network ever once moved a shoot date for a heat advisory at any other school on your schedule? 2 schools requested date changes this season for weather-related reasons. And were those requests granted?" "Yes." "Why wasn't Talmadge County's need any different?" "Talmadge didn't request a change," Steele said. "Mr. Dade indicated the schedule could hold, 'cause you'd already made clear it needed to," Simone said. "Isn't that right?" Objection. Argumentative. "I'll rephrase," Simone said, before Correll could rule. "In your own words, Mr. Steele, whose judgment was actually driving that morning's schedule, yours or Mr. Dade's?" Steele's jaw tightened, almost imperceptibly. "Mine, ultimately, as it is for most decisions at my company." "Mr. Steele, did Vantage Sports Network's board place any conditions on your continued leadership of the company this year?" Objection. Relevance. It goes directly to why this witness prioritized one broadcast date over a documented safety warning, Your Honor. I'll connect it in one question, Simone said. I'll allow it, Judge Carell said. Yes, Steele said, after a moment. Meridian Capital Partners holds a controlling interest in Vantage. There's a performance clause tied to this quarter's rights renewals. What happens if that clause isn't met? They remove me as chief executive and install their own leadership. His voice, for the first time all trial, lost its practiced ease, the courtroom quieter than it had been since the trial began. I built that company from nothing after I lost everything in a collapsed deal 11 years ago. I was not going to let a scheduling conflict be the thing that took it from me a second time. So a boy's life came second to a clause in your own contract. Steele didn't answer that directly. He reached for the water glass in front of him, found his hand less steady than he wanted it to be, and set it back down without drinking, and the jury watched him do it, without a single person in that room needing it explained to them. This court finds, Judge Thaddeus Carell said, once the room had settled, that the evidence establishes the defendant repeatedly and explicitly requested extended safety measures on the morning in question, that those requests were denied by a chain of authority, extending through the athletic director to a private commercial sponsor, whose scheduling needs were prioritized over a documented heat safety protocol, and that a witness was pressured through a threat to his own child's opportunities to alter sworn testimony. I am dismissing all charges against August Reeve with prejudice. I am referring Cormac Steele and Elton Dade to the District Attorney's Office for involuntary manslaughter and witness intimidation, and I expect that referral to proceed without the benefit of any further scheduling considerations this network's resources might otherwise buy it. The gallery didn't stay quiet long. Somewhere behind August, someone let out a long, disbelieving breath, and the murmur spread backward through the rows, the way relief moves through a room that has been holding itself still for longer than it realized. Near the back, Louetta Briggs pressed a hand to her mouth. Kepler gathered his files without meeting anyone's eyes. Steele was already being escorted toward a side door by two officers before the second referral finished being read into the record, and Micah watched him go with an expression that wasn't quite triumph. Closer, if he'd had to name it, to the particular relief of finally being taken seriously. Coach Finch, seated near the front, did not move for a long moment after the ruling, still visibly shaken by the weight of what he'd finally said aloud. And when he finally stood, it was to cross the aisle and put a hand on August's shoulder before either of them said a word. I know sorry doesn't fix 4 months, Finch said. No, August agreed. But it's a start most men in your spot never bother making. I'll take it. August didn't cry in the courtroom. He waited until Simone walked him out through the front doors into ordinary daylight for the first time in 4 months and found Micah and Marielle waiting on the courthouse steps. I didn't say anything to Micah at first. He just held out his hand, palm up, the same gesture he'd used on every sideline for 15 years to check a player's pulse before anything else. Micah pressed 2 fingers to his father's wrist without being asked, found the steady ordinary rhythm there, and let out a breath he seemed to have been holding since the day of the arrest. Still there, Micah said quietly. Still there, August agreed, and for a while that was the whole conversation either of them needed. Marielle stood a step back, watching them, and thought that, whatever else the last 4 months had cost this family, they had not managed to take that away. A father and son who still knew, without needing to say it out loud, exactly how to check on each other. Cormac Steele and Elton Dade were both indicted within the month. Vantage Sports Network's naming rights deal collapsed before the district would even take the meeting, and the school board instituted an independent, district-managed heat safety protocol for every sport, with authority that could no longer be overridden by any booster, sponsor, or athletic director. A policy the board named, at Marielle's request, the Emery Slate Protocol. Every coach in the district, that policy required, would now complete an annual training built around a single line the board voted, unanimously, to print on the first page of the manual. You don't get to call it a team until you're willing to protect the ones nobody else is watching. Marielle's own treatment. In the strange way hard seasons sometimes turn, stabilized that same fall. No miracle, her doctors were careful to say. Just a new course of treatment finally taking hold after 2 difficult years. And August was there for every appointment from then on. A small, ordinary mercy neither of them took for granted again. He kept a note on the refrigerator listing every date, the same way he'd once kept a list of protocols for the sideline, because he'd learned, that year, that watching out for the people nobody else was watching started at his own kitchen table before it ever reached a football field. Coach Aldous Finch resigned his position, but was invited to return the following season by a unanimous vote of the same board that had once nearly lost patience with him, on the condition, which he accepted immediately, that he spent his first month back teaching every incoming coach in the district exactly what had almost happened to Wyatt's family, and to Emery's, because of a silence he never wanted anyone else to inherit. Wyatt kept his spot in the regional program after all. Steele's removal from the organization's board triggered an independent review of every roster decision made under his sponsorship, and Wyatt's, as it turned out, had never actually depended on anything but his own performance to begin with. Elton Dade cooperated fully with the district attorney's office and received a reduced sentence in exchange for his testimony, a fact that did little, he told a local reporter afterward, to make the 2-minute breaks he'd ordered that morning sit any lighter on him. "I keep doing the math," he said. 8 extra minutes, 4 separate breaks. That's all it would have taken. I don't think that number's ever going to stop following me around. No matter how many years pass between now and whatever comes next for me. I didn't think one watch tracking my sprint times would matter this much, Micah told his father, the week the case finally closed. Every beat your heart makes happens whether or not anybody bothers to count it, August said. That watch of yours just happened to be counting the same morning somebody needed proof. That's the whole secret to most of what matters, honestly. Somebody has to be paying attention before anybody else knows to. You've been telling me some version of that my whole life, basically. You have told me approximately 1,000 times, if we're being precise about it. Have I convinced you yet? Micah considered it the way he considered most things his father told him, turning it over before deciding whether to keep it. He didn't answer in words. He just reached over and pressed 2 fingers to his own wrist, held them there a second, and nodded once, like a coach confirming a read before the snap. Micah's number, the 2-minute break, time-stamped and verified, became something of a local shorthand that fall, the way certain facts settle into a town's memory long after the headlines move on. A booster board meeting that winter voted, without dissent, to require an independent safety officer at every practice going forward, answerable to the school board alone, with a budget line no sponsor could touch. Nobody on that board needed the vote explained to them twice. That fall, on the first practice of the new season, August stood at the edge of the field with a cooler of water at his feet and his eyes on the sky the way he always had, and Micah jogged past him mid-drill, glancing at his watch out of habit, calling out the split without being asked. 11:40, coach. Right on the mark for the break. Good eye, August called back. The whole team drank water on schedule that day, every single break, with nobody standing over any of them, deciding a camera mattered more than a kid's body did. Somewhere on the far sideline, a freshman who'd never met Emery Slate laughed at something a teammate said, easy and unhurried, the particular ordinary joy of a kid who had no idea how many quiet decisions, made by people he'd never meet, had gone into making sure he got to have an afternoon that boring, that safe, that entirely his own. A scoreboard only ever remembers who won. It takes someone else entirely, a father who wouldn't stop asking, a son who wouldn't stop remembering, a coach who finally stopped being afraid, to remember who was actually left out on that field, and to make sure, the next time, that nobody is.